Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast with Mike Tagliere, and I'm Bobby Sylvester. You can find us on Twitter at Mike Tagliere NFL and at Bobby Fantasy Pro. Tags, how's it going, man?
Oh man, it's awesome. I'm in a great mood today. I woke up at like 4:30. Was actually DMing with our boss, and he was going to bed as I was getting up. So I started working on some player profiles, things like that, and I was working on Amari Cooper, and it took me down this rabbit hole where I ended up like looking up Joe Juravicious, going back into like early or late 1990s Bucks, and then early 2000s with the Raiders. So it's been a good morning for me, man. I've done a lot of research. I've been awake for a couple hours and ready to record, man.
I love this time of the year, man, when we're, we've been talking about players for so long, but we're really starting to get down deep into players and figuring out, which way we want to go here in drafts. Today, we're going to be joined by one of the smartest and most entertaining guys in the industry, also a genuinely great guy, Chris Harris of the Harris Football Podcast. You can find him on Twitter at Harris Football, and he's even got a cool fiction book on Amazon called War on Sound. Check that out, too. Chris, thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot to live up to. I have to be entertaining and a genuinely nice guy. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, we're probably going to get into it because we've got some disagreements here today, and some where we big time agree, and I'm really excited for you to validate our opinions here. And Chris, we usually joke around the first minute or two before we start the show, but I have so many things I want to get your take on. We really just need to hop into the football. I'm sure there's going to be some laughs in the middle anyway. And today we've got a dozen players from Chris's rankings who are quite a bit different than how the general public views them or how Tags and I have been talking about them. So we want to see why he thinks of them the way that he does. Then we'll close out the show with a handful of training camp battles and a stat of the day that you will not want to miss. But first, I want to tell you about Fleaflicker.com. Commissioners, does your current fantasy site make prepping for a draft harder than it needs to be? Let me tell you about Fleaflicker, the fantasy site built for commissioners by commissioners. Features like email drafts make draft coordination a breeze. Fleaflicker also offers live drafts and an easy-to-use interface, lightning-fast live scoring, year-round access, powerful commissioner tools, and dynasty features, brand new taxi squads, and mobile apps. If you love customization, there are 125 scoring categories and 12 NFL positions, including punters now. Try the new ESPN League import tool. Import over your roster and history with one easy click. Fleaflicker has partnered with the top names in the industry, including fantasy pros, to provide reliable rankings, news, and projections. Best of all, Fleaflicker is 100% free. Go to fleaflicker.com/pros today. That's FLEA, flickr.com/pros. One more time, fleaflicker.com/pros. All right, Chris, I want to start here with Deshaun Watson. You've got at QB number 15, and I probably don't need to tell you the ADP on Watson right now is QB number 2. Now, Tags and I are super low on him, too, so we're with you. Can you tell our listeners why you're super low on Deshaun Watson?
I mean, where to start? That is such a rube ranking. That's such a... It is just sort of like a... let's just look at some numbers and project them and decide that he's going to throw 40 touchdowns. I hate being the contrarian on Watson. I guess between the three of us, I'm not the contrarian, but compared to the market, I hate being the contrarian because I really liked him. He was my number one overall pick in the NFL draft last year. I thought I loved him. I rooted for him. I'm still going to root for him. I like him. His good tape from last year is great, but he has terrible tape too. I'll run through some of the plays because I have this almanac, right? So I've been writing about all these guys for like 2 months. There's week 3 against the Patriots, off the back foot, throwing a pick to Stephon Gilmore. The entire first half, week 5 against the Chiefs, was terrible. First throw should have been intercepted. Basically dug himself a Blake Bortles-esque 23-7 halftime hole. The last game we saw him play against Seattle, there's the Earl Thomas pick 6, terrible. There's the Richard Sherman red zone pick, terrible. He has lots of good. And he also, I see the upside because he has the cheat code. He's a great runner, but he has a long way. He's played 7 games in the NFL, and he's got a long dang way to go between now and when he is Donovan McNabb, which is my career comparison for him. So I like him, but not this year, not at that price.
Tags, do you have any shares of Watson? Like, how far would he have to fall for you to take him?
I don't have any shares. Absolutely not. I would take him in best ball as probably like the QB7, just because, as Chris mentioned, he does have upside that he presents. I'm not going to say he doesn't. I think his legs give him a little bit more, but the fact that he's coming back from an ACL, the fact that the offensive line might be the worst in the NFL definitely hinders what I would expect out of him this year. But again, the fact that he's being drafted as a second quarterback off the board just tells me everything I need to know, that I'm not going to own a single share of him in 2018.
You all know how I feel about Watson. I'm going to leave you with one thing. I've said it before, and for the new listeners, you need to hear this. Deshaun Watson was the QB number 1 for a 5-week sample size. Blake Bortles finished the season as the QB 1 for a 5-week sample size. That's all that you need to know. We cannot base our entire opinion on a quarterback around a tiny sample size. Otherwise, that's how you get lost. I mean, Joe Flacco was better than Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers wasn't healthy. Tom Brady, Drew Brees, everybody in the final 5 games, and Joe Flacco's like the 30th best quarterback in the NFL. Small sample sizes don't cut it. Let's move on to the next guy and talk about small sample sizes. Pat Mahomes has 1 game in the NFL, and people are jumping out of their chairs to draft him in the top 10. I am not buying this. Chris, you've got him at QB number 20, assuming you feel the same way here.
I mean, again, as a prospect I like for the longer term, I'm sort of excited about the arm. There's no question, I don't think, about the arm. I thought in the 1 game that he did play against the Broncos defenders who were ready to get to Cancun in week 17 last year, I thought the game's speed already surprised him then. There are moments on film where the defenders get to his receivers and get on him quickly. More quickly than he expected, but he had like a 25-yard throw in that game that never got more than 5 feet off the ground. Like, he's got a cannon, no question about it, and lots of weapons and all that stuff. Like, you can see where there's upward mobility for sure, but I just think in most leagues where there's no positional scarcity at quarterback, like, why do I need to take the chance on him? Why do I have to indulge the possibility that he gives you 10 fantasy points?
Now, let me ask you this, though. Like, what is his upside? Because he's got some weapons. Obviously, Tyreek Hill, who you've got pretty high. Sammy Watkins, who was horrible last year, but he's got a ton of talent. He's got Travis Kelce. He's got the running backs. Could he finish as a top 5 quarterback if he matures this offseason?
So in this almanac thing of mine, I give them a ranks range, like a best case and worst case. And with Mahomes, I gave him a best case of 10. I said he's going to finish between 10 and 24, which is meant to capture the wide range of possible outcomes. The other guys are going to be just a 5-spot range. So I give him 10 as a possibility, and he has a little of that cheat code in him too. Really good athlete, potential to run a little bit, and like you said, lots of good weapons. But there are going to be mistakes, and there are going to be run-heavy games, and it's going to sort of be the typical young quarterback season, I think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, his ADP's coming down. He was being drafted around 10, 11, sometimes up in the top 10. Now it's sitting at 15, but he's being drafted ahead of Matt Ryan, Alex Smith, Phillip Rivers. Tags again. Same question. Do you have any shares of Mahomes? And if you do, why?
Mahomes I did earlier in the offseason because I do best ball like as soon as the season ends. Pretty much when they open up best ball, I'm doing them because I think that's when you can get the best value. And the hype started building around Mahomes because of the addition of Sammy Watkins and knowing that Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Kareem Hunt. Suddenly it's just like a lot of weapons there. And knowing that the defense was going to lose a lot of pieces, knowing that they have lost a lot of pieces and didn't really replace many of them, it further increases like my interest. But the fact is, I think Chris hit it on the head saying that you don't need to take a risk on someone like him in fantasy drafts. If you get a floor of someone like Phillip Rivers, you're going to be fine because you don't have to take him, as the 10th quarterback off the board where some people are reaching for Mahomes. Now, my career comparison, you talked about McNabb to Deshaun Watson. My comparison for Patrick Mahomes was Jay Cutler. And I feel like the fact that Mahomes got to sit for almost essentially a full year learning Andy Reid's offense, I think that's going to help him. So I think the transition should be smoother. The tools are very similar to Cutler. Got that rocket. He does have some underrated mobility, but I don't think he'll need to use it necessarily that much. Mahomes, he does have the ceiling. He absolutely does, considering the team, the state of the defense, everything with it. But I will say this. I won't draft Mahomes because he's on the road in week 1 against the Chargers. That's a top 3 defense in the NFL. Week 4, he's going to be at the Broncos, a divisional game in Denver. Not going to be a great one.
You can't play him in either of those games.
Yeah, the Jags in week 5. You're not going to play him. What are you
going to do, own 2 quarterbacks? Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, I'm not drafting Pat Mahomes just because his price is a little too high and you're taking on risks that you don't necessarily need to.
Did you just say that Jay Cutler is sneaky elusive?
Yeah, Jay Cutler actually was like that. I mean, I watched Jay throughout his entire career, and Jay actually was a lot more mobile than people gave him credit for.
Yeah, he does not. He does not look it whatsoever. Let's move on to the next position here. Tags, you're gonna love this one. Chris has Joe Mixon as a top 10 running back.
Love it.
Chris, what goes into this ranking? Like, are you not worried that he was just awful last year?
Let's cut to the chase. I didn't think he was awful last year.
Okay.
There were problems around him. Who knows? It's hard to pick apart. First of all, you know me, I'm never going to be the one who picks apart numbers because on film there are tons and tons of plays where Mixon gets the ball and a defensive lineman is just crushing him in the backfield. There's nothing anyone could have done. Le'Veon Bell couldn't have done anything. And the counter to that is, yeah, but what makes you think the offensive line is better? They certainly have worked on it, but there's no guarantees. We see offensive linemen sign and get drafted all the time and not make an immediate impact, so I'm not going to proclaim
We've
that
also
as
seen
my...
it like on the opposite end where they get significantly better, like what we saw with the Chargers, right?
I mean, it can happen one way or the other. I don't know that I even agree the Chargers had a great line last year. They drafted 2 guards and one stunk and one got hurt, but Russell Okung was good. But so anyway, for me, what it comes down to is I call him Le'Veon Jr. He has that thing that where he sees it fast and can decelerate and accelerate on one foot. And that's pretty rare among running backs, especially running backs who are nearly 230 pounds, and that's why Bell himself is such a freak. I actually am doing a lot of the sort of YouTube stuff this year. We're going to have a YouTube channel and doing a venture with Brett Coleman and lots of tape analysis. And I've already done sort of a big 10-minute Joe Mixon package. And I put side by side a couple of Le'Veon Bell runs where he reaches out. How many times have you seen it, right? He reaches out and touches the back of an offensive lineman as he stops and then is able to, with one foot, with one step, re-accelerate back into what he sees. And I put that side by side with Joe Mixon doing the same thing. It's just not common, and I'm not the first one to say it. It is Bell's trademark, and Mixon maybe infringing on it a little bit. Now, he's not quite Le'Veon Bell. From his rookie year, there are moments where he makes really great lateral steps and gets out of trouble that a lot of running backs wouldn't get out of. And then he gets one-on-one with a linebacker, and a good running back is supposed to win that, especially when they're in space. You're supposed to win that, and there are moments where Mixon doesn't. And it kind of reminded me of Bell's rookie year. Bell's rookie year, he's a little heavier. He wasn't quite
that's why Mixon cut the weight.
Right. He wasn't quite as powerful in his legs. And I think that's, I'm hoping that Mixon spent the winter doing squats, because if his legs are a little bit stronger and he sort of has that one last move after he's made sort of the first 2 moves, he could absolutely explode this year. I can tell Tags kind of agrees with the assessment, and I'm happy about that. I'm never going to get wrapped up in not liking the situation or being scared of the line or looking at the schedule, looking at the quarterback. It infringes on my thinking a little bit, and none of those things seem all that great when it comes to Mixon.
Yeah.
I really want to focus on the talent, and I think he's got the potential to be really special.
Tags, I'll let you jump in here in just a second, but first I want to ask you, Chris, what do you think about Gio Bernard? Obviously, Joe Mixon, in order to be an RB1, I guess not in order to be an RB1, but it would be really helpful if he was a 3-down back. Now, Mixon can catch the ball. There's no doubt about that, but Bernard is sitting there. He's been valuable for years. They just drafted Walton as well, who's a similar type of player. Is Mixon going to get the 3rd-down workload he needs to really blossom into a star?
I mean, I agree with the first of your assumptions, which is give me 250 touches. If I get 250 touches, which if you do the math is certainly not 20 a game, it's an RB1. I mean, if the guy's good and the offense is good enough, which often we don't know beforehand in today's NFL. No, Mixon doesn't belong in the workload category of David Johnson or Zeke Elliott or whatever, because Gio Bernard's a good player and gonna play and gonna get 150 of his own touches, and or Mark Walton. But if you give me 250 out of Mixon, which if he's healthy, which is not a sure thing, but if he's healthy, then I'm not worried about it, because I think he's good enough to take those 250 touches and be just fine.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tags, everyone agrees that Mixon has a load of upside, even the Mixon haters. But just how big is this upside? Could he be the Todd Gurley of this year, where he goes from, just being this freak of nature who has this upside to being the best running back in the league? If it's anyone, it's Mixon, right?
Well, Marvin Lewis is still there, so I'm not going to say that he's got Todd Gurley upside. So here's the thing. I wrote a Joe Mixon profile, actually. It released last week, and a lot of people really liked it because they said it kind of changed their mind in regards to what his workload potential could be. Because once Jeremy Hill went down last year, the mix before Mixon hurt his ankle, because if you remember, he suffered a high ankle sprain towards the end of the year. But before that, the touch distribution between him and Bernard was 74 touches Mixon, 34 for Bernard. That's roughly a 70-30 timeshare. Here's the only other running backs who were responsible for 70% of their team's touches in 2017. Le'Veon Bell, Kareem Hunt, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, and LaShawn McCoy.
It's a good stat, man.
In fact, the only running back who actually saw more than 60% of their team's touches and did not finish top 16 was Frank Gore. And Frank Gore, obviously, we know he's old and he is what he is. But so basically, even if we get 60% out of Mixon, even though it was a 70% share last year, we're going to get a top 16 running back. His current ADP, when I wrote that, it was RB16. He's slowly moving up, and he's gotten to the point where he's going to go late second round, and that's basically like my tipping point, where it's like you're bordering on the edge here of like, okay, are we drafting him at his ceiling? I don't think so, because I think Mixon's talent, you mentioned it, Le'Veon Bell, he should model his running game after that. I think he's similar to Matt Forte as a wide receiver. He's very fluid, and that's the thing where people talk about Gio Bernard. Don't mix it up. Mixon is one of the best receiving backs in the game. When he came out in the draft, that's why people were saying that he was better than Fournette, because he's more of a 3-down back. His best attribute, in my opinion, is catching the ball out of the backfield. So to say that Gio Bernard is going to be the 3rd-down back, I think is incorrect. So I think Mixon's ADP, it should be right around the end of the 2nd round. It's just I hoped to get him in the 3rd round because there'd be some room for equity.
I'm not going to talk about it a ton because I want to let you guys kind of do the talking on Mixon, since I'm kind of making up my mind. I had pretty strong feelings against Mixon earlier this preseason. Let's just say I'm glad I didn't make the bet with you, Ted. But Chris, you've got Joe Mixon ahead of Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, Devonta Freeman. How high would you take him?
So he's number 9 in my running back ranks, which that means he's a 2nd-round pick. And if you're picking in the 2nd round, it doesn't matter much where I tell you what to take.
Good point. Yeah,
that's where I think that's where you should go. I did an experts draft yesterday when I had the 1 pick, and it was a PPR league, so little skewed toward receivers, and he almost made it back. He made it back to 23. And my heart got a little broken because he got picked at 23. Jake Seeley, I'm shaking my virtual fist at you.
Oh, Jake Seeley loves Mixon. That's not a surprise.
Yeah, so I didn't wind up getting him, but I certainly would have taken him there, and I probably would have taken him at any point, in the mid to late 2nd round if I'd had the pick there.
Of course. All right, next running back here is Jay Ajayi, and this is one that Tags and I were pretty low on him. With that said, the recent news coming out that he might get more touches, I could definitely see the ranking. I'm open to changing my mind. I mean, I guess I'm open to changing my mind on every single player, but, especially on Ajayi, because I don't know what to think about him. So here's your chance to convince me, Chris.
Well, I don't keep track of coach speak. I don't care what they say about who's getting what. I don't, I frankly don't even believe that because Jay Ajayi is the only big running back on the roster. Well, no, I mean, offenses can veer toward smaller guys too. Like if they were better players, if I thought Corey Clement was a better player or Darren Sproles wasn't a mummy, then I would, I say Jay Ajayi is like kind of by far the best running back there, and I've given up the ghost on. Remember, he was a late 1st-round pick last year with Miami, so I wasn't a booster of him there, but I had him mid 2nd round. I liked him. And I think my argument then is a little outdated. I still viewed him at that point a year ago as a more complete back, and I will acknowledge I don't think he's a top tier talent anymore. That those scales have been taken away from my eyes. I think he's quite a powerful runner. I think he has really good instincts on the interior. I think he moves a pile on the perimeter. I don't think he's special. You're going to run a lot of outside zone in the Eagle offense. I don't think he's really your guy to do that except by way of changeup. And he's going to catch, 40 balls? Like, he'll be fine. It's an offense that wants to throw to the running back, and so he'll be in there, and he'll catch a few balls too. If you wanted to tell me that Ajayi should be 24 instead of 16, this is sort of a matter of me running out of players that I love, because I don't love Jerick McKinnon, because I don't love Kenyon Drake, and I don't love Dion Lewis. There's a bunch of dudes where I go, okay, I mean, I think Ajayi is pretty good, a pretty good candidate for a lot of touchdowns on a team that has a pretty good offense, and I think the best running back on his team. And generally speaking, again, if I can find my way to 250 touches, which no question, at first when he got to Philadelphia last year, he did not. If we're going to base it on the workload of last season until the playoffs, then we're going to be disappointed with Ajayi. But when the rubber met the road in the playoffs, Ajayi was the one who carried them. They don't get to the Super Bowl without Ajayi playing really well with a very big workload and no LeGarrette Blount being there. So I'm not super tied to the rank, and you guys could probably talk me down a little bit, but then you have to talk up Tevin Coleman, and then I vomit a little.
I won't do that.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and I thought you were exceptionally high in Ajayi. And I'm looking at the ECR, and his ECR is 20. So, like, Tags and I are just quite a bit lower on him. Now, you mentioned a couple of the names you have him ahead of. McCoy, obviously, who knows what's happening there. Jerick McKinnon, Sony Michel, Darius Geis. Tags, I know you disagree, so I'm going to let you have the next word here.
Yeah, it just comes down to the offense. And I'm not saying that he's not the most talented one there, but that's not saying much. I mean, Corey Clement, I know some people are expecting a step forward there, but I mean, he didn't receive a lot of touches with Darren Sproles out of the lineup last year, so I don't know what makes people think that he's going to get a ton more with Darren Sproles back in the lineup. I'm interested to see if Darren Sproles makes the team. I would assume he does, though. But for me with Ajayi, it's just the lack of snaps. When you look at it with the Eagles offense under Doug Peterson, he just traditionally hasn't used a running back in a large role. The only player who's ever played more than, I think, 40 snaps in a game was Darren Sproles, and he did it like 2 or 3 times. So Jay Ajayi has really underwhelmed the last few seasons, and I'm glad to hear Chris say that he's dropped his expectations to maybe he's not the player that people thought he was. Going into 2016, Chris, you hit it on the head. He was a late first-round pick, early second-round pick at the latest. Going into that year, so in 2015, the year that everybody loved him, he broke out and this and that, he averaged 19.1 touches per game. He finished as an RB2 just 40% of games. And then you go on to this past year, he was a workhorse again for the majority of the year. I mean, like, he was with the Dolphins, that was for sure. He finished as an RB2 28% of the time. Like, he's like literally lower than Austin Eckler in terms of his percentage that he finished as an RB2 in fantasy football. I'm not saying that Jay Ajayi, he plays behind the best offensive line in football. It's hard to argue with that. The offense, should there be some regression on Carson Wentz and maybe some of that goes to the running back position? Sure. LeGarrette Blount being gone, it's a very mixed backfield, and it's like I don't ever put Jay Ajayi in my lineup and feel great about it. And that's basically, I would rather take someone like Sony Michel, who I know is going to come with tremendous upside. I know he hasn't proven anything, but then again, talking about those numbers, Ajayi hasn't proven anything either. So I'm just worried about the snaps, and if you're not getting snaps at the running back position, ultimately you're just not going to be consistent.
He had a couple of big weeks, but then again, so did Bryce Brown, right?
Going back to, was it Bryce Brown? Man, I hadn't heard that name in a long time.
All right. Lamar Miller, Chris, you've got him at RB number 30. Now, is this a symptom of the offensive line being horrible, Lamar Miller being horrible, Deontay Foreman being right behind him, like right down, breathing down his neck, or is it just kind of a combination of all three?
Is this in standard or in PPR, you're asking?
I thought it was in standard. Let me double check really quick.
I have him 25, so I don't know.
25. Okay, yeah, 25 isn't so low then. But how do you feel about Miller? Right now his ECR is 23, his ADP is 26. So are you worried about Foreman at all, or do you think he's going to end up on the pup?
Again, I don't think of it this way. I just think the better players tend to get enough work for me to be, especially a running back where no one gets work. I mean, no one's guaranteed snaps. Like, if you grant me that Lamar Miller is for sure in there 40 snaps a game, maybe I'm a little low on him, but I just assume at some point someone else comes in, because that's usually the way, unless you have an extreme talent at running back, just sort of the way things work now. So yeah, my stuff is never going to be based on looking at last year's snap count and saying, well, this is how they use running backs, or looking at the depth chart and saying, well, this guy just has too much competition or doesn't have any competition. My analysis is going to be of Miller, and to some extent, I'm trying not to let what I just saw out of the Texans offense or any other offense creep into my thinking, even though that's not possible. But I just think we're terrible at monitoring situations beforehand too. If I could fast forward to December and look at every team and see how they played, of course I would care about situation. It's just like at this time last year, we were all saying, well, you don't want any Eagles, and you sure don't want any Rams. You want to make sure you get Raiders.
That's a good way to put it.
you definitely got to get those Falcons, right? And every year, this is what happens. The Titans' offensive line was so amazing 2 years ago, and last year was garbage. So my assessment of Lamar Miller and all these guys is going to be based on mostly what I think of them as players. And so that's my brief prologue to saying I think Lamar Miller's fine. Like, I think it's weird. I feel like I've always stayed the same on Miller, and the world has wanted him to be a superstar and then has been completely vexed with him and not wanted to own him at all. And I think like he's probably an RB2 if the Texans offense is as great as the Deshaun Watson number 2 overall quarterback ranking, then this is too low because Miller's probably going to be better. If Deshaun Watson is creating that sort of offense, then whatever running back is associated with him is going to be better. I can't reconcile
Not gonna happen.
right? But I can't reconcile how the market could have the running back that low if they think Deshaun Watson's the number 2 quarterback. Miller's was billed as a sprinter. I'll tell you, he's the only sprinter in the NFL I've ever seen who perpetually gets tackled in the secondary because he can't make anybody miss. He's fine. He's sort of turned into this fine, reliable interior runner who has a little bit of snap and a little bit of power, but it kind of comes and goes, and he's always hurt. And I feel like he's just kind of just another guy right now.
Yeah, I agree with that analysis. Tags, I know that you do too, right? You're kind of taking Lamar Miller as like a RB2. You don't really feel great about it, but if you need touches, well, he's going to give them to you, right?
Yeah, basically, and it helps that Deontay Foreman is going to start the season on the PUP list. I really think that he's going to miss the first 2 months of the season with the Achilles. So unless you think Alfred Blue is going to steal the job from Lamar Miller, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. He's a fine player. I don't, and Chris said it that people wanted him to be this breakout star, and that's what he was. I think he's a better timeshare running back. I don't think he was meant to handle 20 plus touches per game, but that's what the Texans kind of signed him to do, so they were kind of stuck with it. He did perform better when Deshaun Watson was on the field. Like, if you look at his splits, he was better in those games. So, I mean, I do have him as like a back-end RB2. Again, he's like part of that group where it's like, I don't want to get into the Ajayis and stuff like that. Like, that's like the 25 through 28 range. It's really iffy. I don't feel great about those running backs. So I would rather take someone like Lamar Miller over Ajayi just because I feel like he's just stable. And like, if you're taking a running back in that area of the draft, take stability, and you can get him for cheaper than Ajayi right now too. So,
okay. Now, I didn't tell you I was going to talk about this, Chris, but I just saw that you have Derrick Henry up at 14.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same kind of thing? Like, obviously we know Derrick Henry is exceptionally talented, but then bringing in Dion Lewis, it's really concerned a lot of people. I guess you not so much.
I have Dion Lewis 21, so like I like them both.
Ooh. Yeah.
The running back ranks or any ranks for me are not a predicted final order of finish. It's the order in which I would draft them, right? With weighing all their pros and cons, as it were. So
of course,
it's not like I'm saying for sure we got 2 top 21 running backs on the same team in Tennessee. However, 2 teammates at running back almost always every year. Some teammates finish together. Sometimes it's in the top 5, as it happened with the Saints last year. Not that anybody predicted that exactly. So they're a lot closer for me in point per reception. They're only separated by like 1 or 2 spots, but still both high as well. It comes down to liking them both and being excited that we don't have to deal with exotic smash mouth anymore, that we'll get some 21st century offensive concepts, some things that Marcus Mariota does well. I think we're going to get more RPOs. We're going to get more 4 receiver sets. We're going to get just more misdirection, more flooding of zones with receivers, and I think just a much more dynamic offense. I mean, that offense was really bad last year. So Henry isn't a favored talent of mine. I don't think he's sort of, if I'm lining up the players I think are just the best football players at the position, Henry wouldn't be in my top 5. I'm not sure he'd be my top 10, but it's undeniable he's unbelievably big and unbelievably fast for how he is once he gets up to speed. It takes him a while. And one interesting storyline is just Dion Lewis would seem to fit what the Shanahan tree likes to do offensively a little better than Derrick Henry. Run the outside zone, misdirection screens, sort of the more, I guess you'd say, horizontal than vertical offense. And yet, I can't, some of Derrick Henry's numbers last year were padded by some game-clinching, defense selling out 80-yard runs that made him look great on paper. But that's on the table. He could do that. He's 250 pounds and he can do that. There are going to be a few games this year where he just, whether it's luck or great blocking, he just gets into the open field and runs faster than men who are 50 pounds lighter than him. And that's exciting. I think he has more week-to-week variability, but he's going to have some nice weekly upside.
I think that's fair to say. Now, Tags, last time we talked about this Tennessee backfield, you weren't really touching Henry or Lewis because we don't know what's going to happen there. Are you still the same, or now that you're hearing that Henry might get more touches, has your opinion changed?
Well, it just depends on where they're drafted, right? Because ADP, yeah, Derrick Henry was way too expensive, especially in PPR formats. But yesterday, I think Chris might have been in that draft that I was doing. It was a CBS mock draft that Jamie Eisenberg put together, and I actually took Derrick Henry. I think I got my first share of Derrick Henry ever, and it was a PPR league. I think I got him in like the 7th round. I mean, there comes a point with every single player where it's like they are well worth where you're drafting them at, and I felt like I got there with Derrick Henry. And it's very rare for me to get there because most people are drafting him in the 4th round, but he fell in this analyst mock draft. So I have soured on Deion Lewis just a little bit, just knowing that they're saying that Derrick Henry is the starter. But Deion Lewis was brought in for a reason. I think that the Titans have done it right in terms of what they've done this offseason. Mike Vrabel coming in as the head coach, bringing in a young offensive mind. Like, I loved what he did there because he just admitted, I don't have anything to do with the offense. Seriously, you run it. And they're going to do that. But Deion Lewis isn't going away. It does cap the upside. Chris said it. The consistency with with Derrick Henry is not going to be there. But I would much rather take someone like Derrick Henry over Jay Ajayi because, yes, they're both in timeshares. But Derrick Henry's he's more talented. And that's where it comes down to talent for me. Better offensive. Well, I wouldn't say better offense because it's hard to say that Philly's going to be bad. But I like Derrick Henry better as a player. And that's why I would take him over Jay Ajayi.
All right, guys, we've got one more running back to talk about, number of wide receivers, and then those training camp battles. But first, I wanted to tell you about yourrules.com. Have you ever wished you could substitute players in fantasy football like a real football coach for whatever reason you want? Player injury, concussion protocol, player ejected, player non-performance, whatever. Now you can with Your Rules' new in-game substitution feature. Don't lose your game while the winning combination is on your bench. Have you ever been involved in a tight fantasy football game and you're down a few points? Your number one receiver goes out for a game-winning catch, 30 yards, he gets mugged. You lose because you get nothing. The real team gets yards, your fantasy team doesn't. Not with yourrules.com. Take control and change your game today. Your team, your settings, your rules. Your Rules is fantasy sports your way. Change your game today. Check out yourrules.com or visit them on Facebook to learn how to play the game by your rules. That's www.yourulz.com. All right, the final player I want to ask you about here is Royce Freeman. Chris, what are you seeing on film that has him at running back 39 for you?
Eddie Lacy. Next question.
You think he's Eddie Lacy all over again? I mean, Eddie Lacy was he was an RB1 one season.
He was. And we'll see. We'll see if Royce Freeman is capable of doing that.
I mean, Aaron Rodgers isn't
fairly
quarterback for Denver. So.
Right, fairly different circumstances. I'll say, I don't care what coaches say. I don't care. I think it's all coach speak, and we'll see. It's not ever going to be the basis on which anything that I make a decision is an interview where someone says Devontae Booker is or isn't, and Royce Freeman is or isn't. I think they're fine. They're sort of nice compliments to one another, and I don't find either one all that exciting as players. I put Freeman ahead of Booker. It's not like I'm saying, the winner here is Booker. I just think the market is looking at a depth chart and saying, well, I've never seen that kid play, but I heard someone say he's pretty good. So sure, he's an RB2. And to be honest, he could be, because RB2 is ugly and RB3 is even worse. So I can't say for sure that I know absolutely what Royce Freeman is. I'm not damning him because of opportunity. Pretty much everything's a committee. It's just, I see a bigger kid who doesn't really move that well. I mean, if you think about it, he's the same size as Joe Mixon. And he moves about half as quick as Joe Mixon. He doesn't really cut. He comes from an Oregon offense that is not really related at all to the NFL. There's stuff to be learned. I don't know if he can pass protect. I suspect he's not going to repeat much of what he did in college. So to me, it's kind of I'm willing to miss out. I'm willing not to spend the draft capital. If somebody's telling me I have to spend like a 4th, 5th, 6th round, I'm sort of just thinking, I guess if Denver's offense winds up being good, cool, then I agree. Freeman's probably the touchdown maker there, but it wouldn't be the basis on which I'd invest a pick.
Now, Tags, I've got a lot of best ball shares of Freeman because, I have all these wide receivers that I like in the first 4 rounds, and it's like, well, I got to get a running back now who's going to get touches. Do you have a lot of shares of Freeman? And if so, why did you do it? Is it the same kind of situation as me?
Oh no! Well, me it was it was his price because Freeman is like the only rookie that like took so long to climb up the ADP. Like he was outside the top 120 players for a long time. We've just now started to see him get inside the top 35 running backs drafted. I've seen him go as high as RB24 now, so he's definitely moving up draft boards. And I don't know how people didn't see this because Devontae Booker is just not very good. Like Devontae Booker has had his chance. He was playing behind C.J. Anderson. People wanted him. People thought he was going to take that job, and then they cut C.J. Anderson. And then they drafted a running back at the top of the third round. So it's like, what is all this stuff telling you? It's telling you that they wanted a workhorse. They wanted someone to come in, handle the first, second down work, and Booker kind of to be the receiver out of the backfield. And they do blend well together because I don't think Freeman is a great receiver. But Freeman on tape reminded me of Jordan Howard. I feel like he's someone who's absolutely going to get what's blocked. I think his vision on the field is fantastic.
Interesting.
He doesn't have all the physical attributes that you'd want, like Joe Mixon. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's built in a different way. He's just like that downhill guy that's going to get behind his blockers. And I think this one comes down to the Broncos offensive line. Does Garrett Bowles play better than they wanted him to? You know, they spent a first round pick on this kid and he was terrible last year. You know, Ron Leary, they got him last offseason. He was fine, but they signed Jared Veld here from Arizona this offseason. So that obviously should solidify the tackle positions if Bowles can step up. So this offensive line severely underperformed last year, but if they can step up and actually play average football, I think Royce Freeman, as Chris mentioned, RB2, you can finish there as long as you get basically you get 200 carries and you're finishing as an RB2.
Yeah.
I think that's the category that Royce Freeman falls into. Now, is he a sexy player? I wouldn't say that, but I think I expect him to win the job and I expect him to get 200 plus carries.
All right, guys, we're going to move on over to wide receiver. First, I want to tell you, though, about, we've been talking about Draft Wizard doing these Draft Wizard drafts, but we've got this live sync function that you can do where if you're doing a draft, whether it's a slow draft, a fast draft, all you have to do is copy the URL. It takes like 5 seconds and it live syncs with Draft Wizard. That way you can have the experts all in your back pocket, see what they think about your picks, get the percentage of, how often they would recommend Mike Evans face Doug Baldwin and all that stuff. It's right in front of you as you're doing your draft. And I think it's the best thing on our site is the live sync function. Tags, have you used it?
Oh, yes. So it's funny because I get tweets from people saying that their league outlawed Draft Wizard for their drafts. No, they basically say because it's almost like they have, a round table of experts sitting with them while they're drafting and kind of just giving them. And so basically it's not just one expert. It tells you a percentage. It says, 56% say take Mike Evans, 33% say take Doug Baldwin. So you can obviously see.
And you can see which experts do it. So like
Correct.
If Sean Corner is telling you to take Mike Evans, you take Mike Evans.
He's a pretty smart dude.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the wide receivers here, and we're going to skip DeAndre Hopkins here. I just wanted to mention that Chris does have him as wide receiver number 4. It seems like everyone that we have on our show has him behind Beckham and Jones, so Chris is with that party. Now, Chris, you've got Tyreek Hill at wide receiver 9. Tags and I have him quite a bit lower, and you have Sammy Watkins a lot lower than Tyreek Hill. Do you think Watkins coming into this offense doesn't really change much?
Not for Tyreek Hill. I mean, again, I'm never going to be the guy who says, and I know based on what I saw last year, based on especially what the numbers said last year, I know what the work share is going to be. I mean, it's just not the way it works in the NFL. It changes every year. I just feel great about the fact that Tyreek Hill is the fastest receiver in the league. I don't even think it's close. He is also in my rankings and my film grades, I gave him A through F, for speed and elusiveness and a few other things. He gets an A+ in speed and an A+ in elusiveness. He doesn't need 11 targets a game. He didn't get them last year. He had 7 targets a game last year. You're telling me because Sammy Watkins is there, he's not getting 7 targets a game? I don't believe it. And if you give a player like Tyreek Hill 7 targets a game, he's going to make explosive plays. He was able to finish as the wide receiver 4 with 7 touchdowns. And I think that that's very reasonable to expect. You're no longer getting him at a discount, no question about it. But that draft that Tags was talking about us being in, I took him at the turn. So at the sort of last of the second, first of the third, I took him right there and was very happy. And frankly, he doesn't play the same position Sammy Watkins does. So I'm cool. If Sammy Watkins wants to produce, that's going to come from somewhere else because Tyreek Hill's getting his 7 targets.
All right. And ECR has Tyreek Hill at number 13. Tags and I both have him down around 20. Now, somebody else you're higher on than the industry is Brandin Cooks. Industry has him at 23. You've got him up at 16 here. I'm with you on Brandin Cooks. So is it just the talent thing, like he's better than Robert Woods and all these guys? Or a lot of people think he goes to Los Angeles and he gets Sammy Watkins' workload. I don't really see that. So Can you explain why you like Brandin Cooks this year?
You just did it for me. It's the same thing where it's not the same team. I know everybody wants it to be like baseball. Everybody wants it to be math, where you can just go, well, I just plug in the same player in the same role and I know how many at-bats he gets. It's not the way it works. Brandin Cooks is a very different player than Sammy Watkins. He's significantly faster and significantly quicker. He also gets the double A+. I think there are only like 4 guys in my film ranks who got the double A+ for speed and elusiveness. And I just think Cooks is a different kind of cat, and all I need is the 7 targets a game he got last year with the Patriots. It made him wide receiver 7. There's plenty of work. Teams are going to throw it 35 times a game. I absolutely believe there are 7 targets out there for Brandin Cooks, and he's such a special player that he shouldn't be treated like he has Drew Brees or Tom Brady as his quarterback, but I think Jared Goff will do enough.
Goff did not throw the ball much last year. Now, a lot of that was that they won in so many blowouts, but I think that Cooks will get a sufficient amount of targets. Now, Tags, you disagree with both of these. You've got Hill quite a bit lower. You've got Cooks quite a bit lower than even ECR. So which one of these two do you mostly disagree with?
I'd much rather take Brandin Cooks at his current ADP than Tyreek Hill. So okay. Tyreek Hill, I have at 15. I don't have him down at 20. I have at 15 just because, I mean, it's like an equation, right? And granted, Tyreek Hill has been super efficient. And if you think that he's going to be the most efficient wide receiver of all time, I understand why you'd have him up in your top 10, just because that's what he's been the last 2 years. So the slight downgrade to Patrick Mahomes, I laugh when people tell me that he's an upgrade over Alex Smith. I'm not willing to jump on that bandwagon right now.
Man.
So I think it's natural to expect some regression. But talking about it, it's just like it's a regular equation. Sammy Watkins does play a different position. They're actually going to move him around the formation, similar to the way they do Hill. But what I'm saying is, you can't add Sammy Watkins and his 90 plus targets to the offense and not take something away from some people. So it's going to happen. I expect them to have more attempts, but I don't expect Patrick Mahomes to drop back 600 times. I don't think that's happening. So it's trying to figure out with his Chiefs offense, someone is going to let you down. They are not going to have 2 top 30 receivers, a top 2 tight end, and a top 10 running back. I think we're all of us.
And then Pat Mahomes is like QB 15.
Right. If they all finish there, then Patrick Mahomes, you might as well draft him as a top 8 quarterback because that's where he's going to be. So for me, it's just about the cost. So I would rather take Sammy Watkins at the wide receiver 30 price than I would Tyreek Hill at the wide receiver 9, just because there's a lot more room for equity in there. And again, I'm not saying Tyreek Hill is a bad pick because he's done it now. I did this article that released just yesterday or Monday that it was points over expected in terms of where they were targeted on the field, where they scored. And even though Tyreek Hill, he only had 4 red zone targets on the year, he scored 50 some points over what he was expected to do last year. And it continues on from where he was his rookie year. He is a special player. However, I just do not want to bet on him being all-time efficient for a 3rd year straight when you add Sammy Watkins. It's just you have to take something off the top of Tyreek. And by drafting him at wide receiver 9 or 10, I just think you're drafting him at his ceiling.
So how many targets does he get this year per game?
Honestly, I could see him dropping down to 95 or 100. I still think he's going to be in that territory.
Game? Whoa. I'm drafting number 1 overall, man.
No, so the thing is, it's not really I look at the whole entire thing because Tyreek actually was really consistent with his targets. There was only 1 game in 2017 where he saw less than 6 targets. So his targets were actually really, really consistent. Whereas someone like Amari Cooper saw 5 or less targets 6 of 14 games. So Tyreek should have been more consistent than I think people thought he should have been with his 105 targets. But when looking at it as a whole, it just doesn't. You just don't see wide receivers with less than 120 targets finishing in the top 10 consistently.
Yeah, and the reason is because he's the fastest player in the NFL.
Exactly, and if you think that efficiency stands up, I understand.
Well, why was he that efficient? Was he lucky or was he fast?
Well, Alex Smith was the best deep thrower in the NFL, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah,
now,
but
granted,
Tyreek Hill didn't play.
Tyreek Hill helps that too.
Yeah,
he plays into that for sure. No, I completely understand that, but I'm saying expecting Patrick Mahomes to come in and keep that level of efficiency as what is essentially a rookie quarterback, I just think it's asking way too much.
All right, guys, we've got 2 more wide receivers here. I was really surprised, and I can't wait to hear what Chris says about the second one. First, Jordy Nelson at wide receiver 31. That's quite a bit higher than expert consensus. And then D.D. Westbrook at wide receiver 38. I've got him twice as low as that. So, Chris, can you cover these 2 players really quick?
Yeah, I mean, I spent a ton of time on Nelson's film from last year, and when Aaron Rodgers was in there for 6 games or whatever it was of last season, like, I don't see anything different. It was what it always was. If you want to say that Jordy Nelson's speed was less, I guess maybe, except for I absolutely see plays. I saw week 1 against Bobby Wagner, a linebacker. He just toasted him. Week 4, Marcus Cooper toasted him. Like, I downgraded his speed to a B-. It's not what it used to be, but it's still above average. It still was fine. I don't have an answer for what the heck happened once Aaron Rodgers wasn't the quarterback anymore, because it wasn't like the Packers were looking at him all that much. I never really saw Brett Hundley's head even turn Nelson's way that much on film, and I admit I don't understand why. I guess, like, I don't know. I rank these guys without looking at anybody else's ranks. I don't look at the market. I just rank them. And when I ranked Nelson, I said, "Oh, I'm giving Nelson a little upside here, but I feel like I'm sort of being sane on him, because who's Amari Cooper, and is he like, I have him higher, but like I don't know. We'll see. Amari Cooper hasn't done anything to make me think he boxes out everyone else, and I just didn't see that Nelson, when Rodgers was in there, had turned into some other terrible player.
Okay.
And then as far as Westbrook goes, I mean, I'm guessing a little bit on the Jags receivers, but I'll say, I did mention the film breakdowns I've been doing. I did a film breakdown on Westbrook. He missed the first 10 games of last year with the core muscle injury. And when he came back, boy, the Jags seemed to want to use him. And the way they used him was really interesting. Essentially, they were like, all right, everybody knows you're fast. Everybody thinks you're going deep. So for several of those games in December, they essentially would throw him the 2-yard out, because corners play off of him because they're frankly scared to death of him. And I like receivers of whom defenders are immediately scared to death before they've ever played it down in the NFL.
He's talented.
And so those 2-yard outs turned into, sort of free money. And listen, I get it. I'm not a big fan of Marquise Lee. I had Matt Harmon on my podcast on Tuesday, and he's a much bigger fan of Keelan Cole. So this is sort of a provisional rank where I go, let's see. This is, I don't pay too much attention to training camp, but I want to see who runs with the ones. I want to see if, is freaking, there's no more Allens there, but is Dante Moncrief really a thing? I hope not. I tend to think not.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they paid him $10 million, so who knows? He must be.
See, again, I think those are crutch arguments where they can afford to give Marquise Lee a big extension. They can afford to give Dante Moncrief more money than he's worth because the rest of their roster is cheap right now. So they can give these short-term bursts. That doesn't mean, Matt said this on the show too, that doesn't mean that they're sitting in the huddle and Blake Bortles goes, okay, it's 3rd and long, and who did I pay $10 million to? That just doesn't, coaches are going to play the players that they think are best. That's one thing you can always, or most of the time, count on, is that the coach's interest is aligned with yours. You want to see the players succeed, and so do they. So I'm perfectly willing to say that, come mid-August, if D.D. Westbrook is not running with the ones, I mean, it's way too high of a rank and I'll come down.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think almost every draft I've done, the double-digit drafts I've done, in those late rounds, I'm getting Westbrook.
He ran with the ones during the playoffs last year, and Keelan Cole didn't. With that said, Keelan Cole was the 2nd best fantasy wide receiver over the last 5 weeks, so I don't know what they're going to do. Tags, we haven't talked about Westbrook at all. Do you have any shares of him?
I don't, just because it's a mess, and I don't think that there's room for 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers there. And I think Marquise Lee, the money they spent with him, they basically passed on Allen Robinson and said, we'll sign Marquise Lee instead. And then they threw $10 million at Dante Moncrief. And then they drafted DJ Chark in the 2nd round. So none of it really adds up. DJ Chark is a similar, that field stretcher. So I don't understand kind of what the Jags did with this wide receiver core. I still don't understand it, but I do know that Marquise Lee over the last 2 years has garnered a lot of targets. He's top 30 he's top 30 in the NFL in targets over the last 2 years. So they signed him to a long-term extension. Obviously they believe in him. Moncrief was more like a rent-a-player. So if there was someone to be benched of this that got paid, I think it's Moncrief. But signing him to a 1-year deal for $10 million didn't make much sense. So I don't own much Westbrook just because I don't think there's going to be 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers here. I think the team is built to run the ball. They added to the offensive line this offseason. Leonard Fournette, if he stays healthy, he's going to touch the ball 30 times a game, and all will be well with Jacksonville.
I'll tell you exactly why the Jags did it, because they had 9 of 11 wide receivers get injured last year. I mean, they ran out of bodies. So they're like, well, we might as well get 5 good wide receivers, and then maybe Bortles will pass for, 40 yards a game. Actually, he was all right last year. I should stop saying that. All right, final player I want to ask you about here, Chris, is David Njoku, tight end, number 11. I've seen some people have him really high. I've seen some people say, where are the targets? I stand on the where are the targets end. I guess you're standing on, I'm not going to disagree. He has a ton of talent, but I'm assuming that's your thing here.
That's my thing in general, Bobby.
Yeah.
You come on my show enough to know that's my thing.
Of course.
Like the whole where's the targets argument, that whole paradigm of looking at fantasy that way doesn't work because we're bad at guessing. It's what got you to draft Kenny Britt last year. It's what got you drafting Torrey Smith 2 years ago. It's what's going to get people spending an early second round pick on Jerick McKinnon. Assuming that we know how these things break, independent of how good they are, just leads you down the wrong path, and it makes you miss out on good players. And I'm not going to sit here and pound the table for David Njoku. I feel like once you get outside tight end, I don't even know, 6, 5? Like, I don't really care. I'm just going to wait.
Yeah.
I took Njoku in that draft yesterday because I waited till the very end to take a tight end. But he is a really good player. He's a really interesting talent. There's a touchdown he scored last year where it's not a very well thrown ball, shocking, and he flips his hips in the end zone and adjusts in midair in a way that, he looked like an Evan Engram clone to me. And so I just go, you know what? If I'm going to wait, cool, man, I'll take a shot on Njoku and see if the offense has changed in some way and emphasizes him in some way. Josh Gordon is or isn't there. Like, who knows? I don't know what that situation will be. And if by week 2 Njoku's done nothing, welcome aboard George Kittle. Welcome aboard O.J. Howard. Welcome aboard some dude who didn't get drafted. And I'm going to sort of play musical chairs at tight end.
It's finally going to be Austin Hooper this year. Wouldn't that be funny?
Right.
Oh God, no, it's not.
I don't think I'm not saying that. Nobody draft Austin Hooper. I was making a joke, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand the argument. Tags and I have just raved about this guy's talent, but then again, Josh Gordon has a ton of talent, and we know that. Jarvis Landry has a ton of talent, and we know that. Duke Johnson gets 60, 70 receptions every year because he's really talented. So, I don't know how much Tyrod Taylor's going to throw the ball. Tags, do you think that maybe Buffalo just didn't let Tyrod Taylor throw the ball, but maybe Cleveland opens him up because he's got all these weapons now?
It's so weird. Like the way they built this team. I think Baker Mayfield is the starter, obviously long term, so they've done it. But bringing in Todd Haley, someone who's known as passing the ball an awful lot, like he's never in the top of the league in rushing attempts, even though he had Le'Veon Bell. So David Njoku last year, 3.8 targets per game on a team that threw the ball. They were top 10 in passing attempts. So he didn't get the target. Set the valve basically almost matched him for targets.
But
they went out and signed.
It's because he's a rookie.
No. I know. I get it. No. Hold on. I'm just attacking the points here. But what I'm saying is that even if you combine Njoku and DeValve's targets last year, you're not going to get to a tight end, like a top 8 tight end. And the thing is,
how many is it? How much is it?
You would be looking at like 6 targets a game.
That's what Jimmy Graham got.
Well, no,
that's
more
Jimmy
than Jimmy Graham also scored double-digit touchdowns.
That's also more than Kyle Rudolph got. And
right. Njoku is a red zone guy too.
Sure.
Well, I love Njoku, but however, I'm saying the tight ends are not going to get that target share anymore when you add Josh Gordon, who came on in the final 5 weeks of the season, Jarvis Landry, who they signed for a lot of money, drafted Antonio Callaway. I have some pass-catching running backs.
In the end, Tags, we're just making different arguments. You're looking at the depth chart and not caring about the talent, and I'm saying, man, if you don't think he can't get 5 or 6 targets a game, they're going to throw 35 times a game because it's the NFL in 2018. I just think it's not the argument you want to be telling people to follow, because in the end, it's just like it's disingenuous. It's disingenuous to say that there aren't 5 targets a game for David Njoku. Come on, if he's a good player, there's 5 targets a game. For David
Why
Njoku.
didn't he last year though? I understand because he was a rookie, but
if
Evan Engram got him.
Evan Engram got him because the depth chart broke right because everyone got hurt. So that could certainly, and the reason Evan Engram was able to be really good as a result is because it turned out he was a really good player. So you wanted to draft him because he was a really good player. And I think that stands true for 90% of the people that we talk about potentially drafting. You want a good player so that if and when the situation breaks right for them, because we can't predict the situation beforehand, you want them to be able to take advantage. You want them to be, like when what's his name? Corey Coleman gets hurt, Kenny Britt becomes the cause celeb. Well, why couldn't it? Well, the problem was he couldn't play. The situation broke right for him, but he was bad at football, so it turned out he couldn't play, and he wasn't worth anything. I get the argument because I'm not going to jump on the up and down on the table for the Cleveland Browns tight end. They didn't want to get I totally get it. It's much more the methodology that says, you guys are telling me you love this player, you think he's really great, but you would stay away from him because, and I'm just that means I have to draft Trey Burton?
Well, I mean, Hugh Jackson's still part of this equation too, and the fact that Hugh Jackson, he still oversees everything, and I have a real problem with that. And so David Njoku, I think everything that could have went his way last year did go his way. I mean, granted, the quarterback sucked, but usually, he would have fallen into targets there. Because, think about it. Corey Coleman got hurt. Josh Gordon didn't play for the first 11 weeks. Rashard Higgins and Ricardo Lewis
were the
two wide receivers that were, you know what I mean? Like, Isaiah Crowell is bad at football. There's just so many problems here, and that's why I think everything, like Evan Ingram, a lot of things broke his way. Eli Manning was bad at football last year, but I mean, but Evan Ingram was fine. So again, I think Njoku was a very developmental player, and I still think he is. I think that the dude is a freak. Like, he will catch some touchdowns. I just worry about the targets, and usually with tight ends, targets just mean so much.
Wow, I just saw that David Njoku his ADP right now is tight end 12. I didn't know that. Chris, I was I was amazed that you had him that high just because I have him so much lower, and I think Tags does as well. You're right there with the consensus, man. I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, tight end is kicker. You're really not. Yes. You're not betting on targets. I sort of don't agree with that idea that you're betting on targets, because the best guys get 7 or 8 a game. And these guys in this next round, we're hoping they get 4 or 5. In the end, it's about touchdowns. It's just, please, Kyle Rudolph, fall in the end zone, or please, Jimmy Graham, get another ISO on the outside and throw me a jump ball. And yes, I agree that for any of these guys to work out, they have to score 6 touchdowns. The back end tight end game is like, give me 606, give me 600 yards and 6 touchdowns, and let me walk to the bank. I'm good. Gronk's going to get 1,212, but I'm going to have spent so much less on my tight end that in the end, hopefully the player I took instead of Gronk takes me to a title.
All right, Chris. Thank you so much for coming on our show. It was a lot of fun, and definitely learned a lot. Looking forward to chatting with you again.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
It's our pleasure. Take care. All right, Tags, let's talk about some of these training camp battles here, and I've got 5 of them highlighted. First of all, Saints number 2 wide receiver. We mentioned this a little bit last show. Right now they're saying Cam Meredith. He's coming back from the surgery, though. If it's not Cam Meredith, who is it, and where do you take this guy? Because whoever it is going to be really good, right?
I mean, you want to think so, right? I mean, but the thing is, adding Ben Watson back, having Alvin Kamara, these guys are taking a little bit off the top. The question is, do the Saints go back to the 600 pass attempts? Because if they go back to the 600 pass attempts, there's absolutely going to be someone that comes out outside of Michael Thomas, because he's obviously the insto de facto number 1. I would tend to think that it's Cameron Meredith, and the reason I say that is just because, he was handpicked. They let go of Willie Snead knowing exactly what was happening there. Ted Ginn is towards the end of his career. He wasn't necessarily the deep threat he's been known as throughout his career. So while Ted Ginn's not going to go away, I do think that Cameron Meredith is the number 2 target here. It's just the question is, how consistent can he be with someone like Michael Thomas on the team? Because Michael Thomas, he demands a big target share.
ECR number 56, ADP number 56 for Cam Meredith. He's being drafted behind Kenny Golladay, Alan Hearns, Nelson Aguilar. No, that doesn't make any sense at all to me. I'm drafting Cam Meredith. I've got a few shares of Ted Ginn just in case, but Colts number 2 wide receiver. We've been talking about Ryan Grant. Is there any chance that it's somebody else? I mean, what if they sign Dez Bryant here? Just how high would you draft Dez?
Yeah, the Colts are a team that actually should look into Dez. I think the Packers, the Colts, and the Seahawks.
He's basically Dante Moncrief now at this point in his career, right?
Well, that's the thing. He's a better version of Dante Moncrief.
Yes.
And that's the thing. I don't think Dez is completely done, but I'm starting to have my doubts of whether or not he plays football again, and that really sucks. I just feel like the guy is not done. I think he's 30 years old. He shouldn't be done. He really shouldn't. And I would love to see him sign there, but the fact of the matter is, it's a new offense. It's a new quarterback. He's too late. They're already starting training camp. He's not signed with a team. I think he's undervaluing how much it means to get in and have some rapport with a quarterback, because if you remember, when him and Dak Prescott played with each other for the first few games of 2016, they weren't very good. They developed chemistry as the year went on. So I'm worried about that, but I do think it's Ryan Grant. I think they paid him to come in and do that. The only other player I could see potentially stealing that job is Deion Kane. And I know Doris.
I thought you were going to say Chester Rogers.
No, he's not very good at football.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that. I don't know if Ryan Grant really is either, though, but he's the second best on their team.
Well, Ryan Grant has overcome some major obstacles to get where he did, so I give Ryan Grant credit, and I like the fact that he bet on himself with a 1-year deal. I'm okay with that. I feel bad at what happened with the Ravens to him, but either way, Deion Kane is more of like a possession style receiver out of Clemson. I didn't love him in the draft process, but he could be a possession receiver. Whereas Doris Fountain, the guy they drafted draft before him, wasn't a big fan. I don't see it. So I do think this is Ryan Grant, though. So I feel comfortable saying that Ryan Grant will finish the season, if he plays all 16 games, he will finish the season as a top 60 wide receiver, but he's not being drafted at all.
Oh, that's not really a bold take, man. I thought you were going to say like top 40. Because if he plays all 16 games as the number 2 receiver and Andrew Luck's healthy, I think he's a lock for the top 30.
Well,
there's a lot of ifs there. 16 games, stays the starter, Andrew Luck healthy. That's a lot of ifs. But if it happens, he's top 30, man.
Well, top 30 it's a tall order, and I think you'd have to regress T.Y. Hilton in order to get there. Right now, I have Ryan Grant down for 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's my projection, which has him right around the wide receiver 50 to 55 range among projections. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like I think he's worth a flyer. Like let's say that T.Y. Hilton suddenly Andrew Luck doesn't throw the deep ball as well as he used to. Maybe the new offense it favors the perimeter wide receivers because T.Y. Hilton has played the slot an awful lot over the last few years. So roles are going to change with this new offense too. So don't forget about that.
Last time Andrew Luck played a full season, 4,700 yards, 40 touchdowns. I mean, I think T.Y. Hilton and somebody else would be perfectly fine. Maybe it's just that both tight ends are relevant. I don't know, because I don't think Ryan Grant's that great. But because of where he is on the depth chart, I've got so many shares in best ball. What about these Seattle running backs, man? I mean, I don't know what to think because Chris Carson, I go back and I look at the tape and he looks solid. He looks good, but then I watch Rashad Penny. I remember us raving about Penny. Like, we loved him in college. He ended up in a bad situation. Like, I know their offensive line got better and everything, but I just wish he would have ended up somewhere else where we knew that Pete Carroll wasn't going to screw with him. I mean, is he definitely going to start because he's the first rounder, or is Pete Carroll just horrible for fantasy?
I mean, if you don't start a guy that you drafted in the first round at running back, Pete Carroll might be fired. I don't know if I don't know if this I don't know if this is Pete Carroll's call. I don't know if he had any say so in the decision. I don't know if it was the front office. I have no idea. But if you don't play your first round pick at running back, you might get fired. So I do think it's Penny. There's some questions, and I think we're going to be doing a running back preview show pretty soon. I can't wait to talk about Penny, man, because like seriously, I was going through my rankings. I was going through some projections. I was going through some player profiles, and I really don't understand why people are drafting Rashad Penny over some of the players that are so much safer. They've performed better than the Seahawks running backs. Like there's just a lot of question marks here with Penny that you don't need to take that risk as like a top 18 running back like some are doing.
Agree. Yeah. You know what? We need to split that running back show up into 2 shows because we just have so many players to talk about.
For sure.
We can't squeeze 50 players into one show. You guys would hate that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, Detroit running backs. We've mentioned this a fair amount, but I haven't heard enough about what you think about Kerryon Johnson. Now, obviously, Amir Abdullah might be cut. Hopefully he is so he can get a second life somewhere. They've got Theoretic. He's going to be on the roster. Kerryon Johnson. Do you draft any of these guys or it's just a big mess?
It seems like a big mess. And Kerryon, I was drafting him a lot in best ball, but his price has finally come up because he was being drafted. It was like the 40-something running back off the board where Blunt was going as like a top 35 running back. And I laughed at that, saying that it should have been flip-flopped and I wouldn't draft Blunt at all. But, you know, it would help if we saw LeGarrette Blount get cut because that would free up some goal line work because we know Theo Riddick and Amir Abdullah haven't been great in that role. So I would like to see LeGarrette Blount get cut in order for me to draft Kerryon. But I do think he comes with upside because if you're looking for running backs in you know, beyond the top 30, like the guys who potentially could finish top 12, Kerryon Johnson's in that conversation because the Lions offensive line has improved. I ranked them as a top 10 offensive line heading into this year, and he's got 3-down ability. He's a really good receiver out of the backfield, which was what made me question that and why Amir Abdullah is still on the roster because all these players just don't mesh. So I question that, but Kerryon Johnson's the only one that I would actually consider just because he was drafted at the top of the second round.
Yeah, the same thing with me. I was drafting a fair amount of them just because it's like, well, he's probably going to be the guy getting touches. I don't know. He has got some upside as well, but now that his ADP is so much higher, I'm not drafting him there. There's just other players I would prefer. Okay, Joe Flacco, Lamar Jackson. They just came out and said Lamar Jackson is going to get on the field one way or another. Does that mean like they make him a wide receiver? Does that mean they use him as like, you know, a Tim Tebow in the red zone? I have no idea what that means. Does that mean he's starting week 1?
I kind of see it as like a Johnny Manziel type thing, you know, where they use Johnny like you said, down at the goal line. Joe Flacco is not necessarily a great red zone passer. He never passes for a whole bunch of touchdowns. They usually want to run the ball inside there. So why not go to Jackson in those situations? So I think that's what they're talking about, because from my understanding, Flacco's looked great throughout camp. Like, they're saying that his back is better, his mobility is better, which he never really had. His arm, he's throwing the ball down the field, that his back is feeling better. There's all this fluff. There's also fluff on Lamar Jackson, but they also said they knew Lamar Jackson was a project when they drafted him. They also admitted they don't know how to use him. So, I mean, it all doesn't make sense to me, but I still stand by the fact that Flacco starts at least until their bye week, or they're like mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. So if they start like 0-6, yeah, he'll start before then, but I don't see that happening with a Harbaugh.
The Ravens are never going to do that. That's not the Ravens.
Right.
Here's what I think. I think they're going to play Jackson enough to showcase just how talented he is, and they're going to flip their end of the first round pick into a huge package because they like Flacco. I don't think they're going to get rid of Flacco. I don't think Flacco's going to lose his job to some rookie. I think Flacco's going to be all right this year. But I think Lamar Jackson plays enough snaps that he goes out on the field. He looks amazing. Everybody's talking about him. And then they flip him to some team who loses their quarterback, who has playoff aspirations. Maybe Big Ben. No, I was going to say Big Ben goes down and they trade him to the Steelers. Can you imagine the Ravens trading a young superstar quarterback to the Steelers? Obviously not that, but something along those lines. Maybe Jared Goff, if he was to go down or something. The Rams would pick him up, and then he could go in there immediately and run the offense. I think that he gets traded as a rookie quarterback, which we've never seen before, but when I hear he's going to get on the field one way or another, I think they're trying to showcase him.
That's definitely interesting. I think that's a hot take. I think that's something that you should have saved for our hot take show, and you should have put that, because I don't think anybody believes it. I don't believe it. No, I think that the Ravens are actually preparing for life without Flacco. I think that they're moving in a different direction. The way that they've built the offense, Hayden Hurst is able to be moved around in a lot of different ways as well. But Joe Flacco gives there's just so much predictability when you have Joe Flacco under center. So there's only so much you could do as an offense, but I think that they need to get rid of their offensive coordinator as well as Joe Flacco in order to maximize Lamar Jackson.
Do you think Flacco gets another job after he leaves Baltimore?
It's up to him, really. Because yes, he will have another job. I don't think he would be signed as a starter. Just because like the NFL is automatic, like now all of a sudden it's saturated. You have these quarterbacks being drafted. A lot more quarterbacks are going in the first round. And it's just so saturated that where it's like, I think he can start. I think I still think he's top 32 in the NFL. But that's not saying much.
That's not to say some team's not going to take a chance on a younger quarterback to see what they've got.
Right. Or someone that drafts a quarterback, they might bring in Flacco to be a starter for a year or two just because they want a bridge to their young quarterback. Like, that can happen too.
I think it can be like a Jay Cutler situation where somebody gets hurt, Flacco doesn't sign for a while, and then they're like, we really need a quarterback. This guy is reliable, and they sign him. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
All right, man, let's end this with the stat of the day, and this one is about Charles Clay, if you can believe it. Don't tune out. I know you're not interested in Charles Clay, but listen to this, okay? A lot of you listeners probably don't, you only recall the final stat line from Clay, and it wasn't that great. I'll give you that, okay? But don't forget, he was injured in week 5. He missed some time. Wasn't the same for a while. Now, eventually, the Bills got him back up to pre-injury snap counts over 80% for the final 4 weeks. He was at over 80% the first 4 weeks of the season and the final 4 weeks. So here's the stat. In those 8 games where Clay was actually healthy, weeks 1 to 4 and 14 to 17, that's a half-season sample size, Charles Clay was second among all tight ends with 57 targets, and his 27% target share in those weeks blows everyone out of the water. In fact, if you include running backs and wide receivers, that 27% target share in those 8 healthy weeks was third highest in football behind just Antonio Brown and DeAndre Hopkins. Tags, can you believe this?
I can believe it, actually. I mentioned that I've been up doing research today, and like one of the things I was doing was going through some numbers from 2017, and Charles Clay is being severely underdrafted for how he performed last year. Like, he really is. Like, he's one of those people that saw 5.7 targets per game. He only played the 13 games, so it did hurt his finish a little bit. But there was a time in there where people like were playing him every week to start the season. Like, he was one of the hottest waiver wire acquisitions, but people forget that. The reason I
used him in DFS all the time.
But the reason people are down on him, though, is because the offense in general. Like, you're talking about an offense that it'd be lucky to score 2 touchdowns a game. And I don't think that's being sarcastic in any way. The quarterbacks are very inaccurate, the ones that they have on the roster. And, here's the thing. he's kind of like a Jared Cook now, right? You know that Jared Cook was like lined up for targets last year. You didn't want to draft him. You kind of knew he was going to finish top 20, top 18 because of all the targets he gets, but you never feel great putting those guys into your lineup. And that's where I'm kind of at with Charles Clay.
I agree. I've got him at 16. Like, he's going to be a streamer 4 weeks in the season. I'll use him in DFS twice. Besides that, yeah, do not draft Charles Clay. I just thought it was so interesting that he got that many targets. Like, best ball leagues, yeah, go out and get him.
Yeah, he provides a floor at the tight end position because I do think that he sees at least 5 targets per game, and that's pretty rare to find a tight end position for as cheap as you can get Charles Clay.
All right, man, that's all for today's show. Tags, that was a lot of fun, man.
It was, man. I can't wait to get back at it. I'll have a tight end stat for you guys tomorrow.
All right, thanks to the sponsors of today's show, yourrules.com. You can play the game by your own rules, get points for pass interference, yardage, in-game substitutions. Lots of fun. Check out yourulz.com. And also Fleaflicker.com, where they've got 125 customizable settings. You can customize it your way, built by commissioners for commissioners. Fleaflicker.com. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.